Hey Doomers, welcome back. It's late September in the Catskill Mountains, and paying tribute to Shackleton the Explorer, this is my black kitty, Una, who's a Manx and has no tail and would like to get out of my arms, is precious. I picked her up from a retake facility in northwest Arkansas and lost her once. Got her back, thankfully. So I decided to turn on the camera and just talk about life. I want to give a thanks to Melinda McGinnis and David Summers for continuing to contribute to this channel, which is largely dedicated to environmentalism and the economy / geopolitics, but that's not the focus of today's talk. I had a long day at work and just felt like talking. Because who am I? Is this self-validation some way to get you to appease my credibility? No, this is an outlet. It's a powerful tool to reach people all around the world. And I know many of you are in such varying different places. And I mean that. From homelessness, some of you are wealthy, middle class, if that's still a thing, and or just coasting, trying to find your place. You're not alone. We're all thrown into this grotesque experience, trying to make the best of it when we can. Don't get me wrong, I'd love to travel much more. You know, many of you have perhaps been to many more places than I have. Speaking candidly here and openly, I still haven't been to East Asia, many parts of Europe, Canada, South America, Papua New Guinea, the Cayman Islands, the list goes on. This channel isn't dedicated to travel, but like anybody, I enjoy it much as anyone. So who's this doom wizard that you're subscribed to? Who am I exactly? I'm just a realist living in the 21st century along with all of you, witnessing, observing, and partaking in the collapse of civilization. I was born on January 14th, 1989 in Arlington, Texas. My parents are both from Louisiana, which is where they met. I am not in contact with either of them. I do not subscribe to the ideology that you should follow a cult-like devotion to your family. I'm perhaps with Jesus in that regards, maybe more in tune with spirituality in some sense, but I'm not into magical thinking. So I spent my childhood playing sports on the street with my fellow neighbors back when a time there wasn't cell phones, maybe pagers, and maybe the big cell phones, but not in any capacity like there are today. I had a boring childhood school experience, but my home life was very troubled. My mom was very mentally ill, and my father refused to partake in parenting. I never received a congratulations or hug or any attention from him because he simply didn't know how. Which is a false and phony excuse for not rising up to the challenge and a declining of responsibility. I am no fan of tough love, but I am also not a fan of spoiling your children because they often turn out to be spoiled brats as adults. Only later did I find out that your formative years play a crucial role in the development as an adult. It is nature and nurture. So, trying to keep my thoughts coherent here and not give you the whole gory story, but it was nightmarish. My mom would have temper tantrums, raging Cajun moments, and was really traumatized person herself. She did not address her own trauma until it was too late. And I don't forgive either of them because they had every right and time and responsibility to take measure and stock of their own emotional well-being and address their own psychological turmoil rather than letting the trauma drip down to me and my sibling. Regardless, I was just put into this existence to give my brother some company so he wouldn't be alone, and I do not respect or have any contact with both of my parents. The Doom Wizard is alone, for all accounts, but not truly. I have all of you. I've moved on and made my own family along the way, because in a spiritual light or viewpoint, we were all brought on this earth without our consultation. We were just atoms sprouted up from nothing, and we can make our own family along the way. This is not a new story. I know people feel this all over the planet, whether you're in Bangladesh or Africa. We're all just trying to make sense and meaning out of our lives. The lack thereof causes depression, among other things. So my childhood was very traumatizing, and I wouldn't recommend to my worst enemy, actually. I only came to find out that it was totally wrong, meeting other people along the way and hearing their experiences and their relationships with their family. Some had it worse, some had it better, but overall, it wasn't good. Now, could you say that affected my viewpoint on the world? No. I think I still would have reached the conclusions that I have now if my genetic makeup had still been the way it is. I think I would still be a realist, as many are. I meet of you on the internet, around the world, along the way, in real life too. Not just the internet. So I was eager to get the hell out of there as soon as possible, and they were happy to have me out. My mother essentially fell out of the relationship years in and just faked it until my brother and I were old enough to get on our feet and become individuated, if you want to use that word, as adults. And so I carved my own path. I can't explain why I had the interest that I did and why many famous people invented airplanes and the telephone and all kinds of things. What draws us to, or molecular studies, anything, any kind of scientific, physiological, spiritual discovery, what draws us, I have no explanation for. But all I know is I could find my own path. And Buddha said this, that you find your own way. There's many different ways to enlightenment or gathering understanding of your natural world and your place in it. And they're all different, and no one can have that experience but you. So I don't need to school you on this or validate any feelings I have. I'm just telling you it like it is. Your journey is your own, and it's unique. No one can undergo what you experience, but that shouldn't affect the way that you treat others and the way that you try to live harmoniously in your surroundings. That includes others. My father worked as a telecommunications in various industries, most notably oil and gas. My mother was a stay-at-home mom to dedicate her time to raising us, and I wasn't without. I had steady meals and food, clothing, but at the expense of great emotional turmoil and abuse, narcissistic abuse, invalidating my feelings, casting me to the side. Really became apparent, as I got older, that I was just a kind of a byproduct, a side note, not just from them, but other family members in the extended family, how they acted later on. So I carved my own path, like I said, and I just drew myself towards things that were interesting to me. My role models and aspirations as a teenager were people like Bruce Lee, Jimi Hendrix, really larger-than-life characters, as many teenagers have. And they sculpted me. But of course, I found out later, as I got into my 20s, that they were just as conflicted and normal as everybody else. It's a problem when you paint up somebody too big, and then you learn that they're just as troubled as the rest of us. I jumped around careers, experimented with things I liked, did lots of drugs throughout my middle to late teens and even early 20s before I started to get my act together. Was in 3 medium-term relationships, perhaps 4 if you want to count high school. And then just lived the American way, doing this and that job, finding what I liked and didn't like. Your 20s are such a turbulent time. It's hard to say things without coming across like a fool, because you were. Your frontal lobe doesn't fully develop till your mid-20s, so you're kind of half there, if you know what I mean. Despite being in one of the most physically primed ages in your life. You're mentally not fully developed. And I traveled to all the places, at least in the North America, that I wanted to go. I wanted to see. And met many a nice people, evil people, was helped and wronged along the way, riding the roller coaster of life. Satire said, joy is other people, but also hell. I think it's the other way around. Hell is first. And things didn't really start to click till my late 20s. Lived long enough to know right from wrong, how to assess the situation, see it from multiple angles, be objective about things, but young enough to still have youth and vitality. Age is certainly catching up with me now. I'm much less active than I was in my 20s and teens, but that's to be expected. So my parents divorced when I was around 21, 22, and it was all kind of not a surprise. I had been seeing that they were conflicted throughout my youth, but I was always ignored. I had these insights about things happening in the family and extended family, one of whom which committed suicide, my uncle. And it troubled me, having these insights but not being able to act upon them because I was so young and didn't have the life experience or was taken seriously. My brother was coddled. I don't talk to him either because he's a vulnerable narcissist, mentally ill, not of right and sound mind. It's impossible to have relationships with narcissists because it's all one-sided. And anytime you have a concern or an issue, they will deny accountability. And that kept happening. Bullying, comparisons, denial of accountability, self-aggrandizing, all of the signs of a coddled child, and mental illness is what it really boils down to. Not to say that I haven't had my own, but I feel much more collected now. I really feel healed. I've had enough time and tools incorporated into my regimen to assess my place in the universe, perhaps find some spirituality in my own way. I've been blessed in that way by the universe. Some people just don't have the time or energy, or they don't even invest into their own mental well-being. And instead they inflict that on others, such as my parents. And you could say, well, you can't blame them because they didn't know any better. Well, they kind of did. Yeah, they had the resources, tools, and availables. They could go to the library, they can go to psychiatrists, they could seek help. But they refused to address their problems and instead let them boil out onto others. And that's all being said despite them having reputable jobs and being attendees of social gatherings and being on time and punctual, that same word, to work. Their obligations to pay bills, not to be alcoholics. You could say, well, they did their part, give them a pass. I don't. I really don't. You don't get a pass. You have to be on your best to be associated with me. I'm not giving excuses because there's no excuse to be made. We have this one fucking life, and you make the best of it, and you make other people's experience as best as it can be. And I did a whole video on this, on mental illness. If you inflict emotional or psychological terror on others, granted, you could say, well, who am I yelling at people for the climate crisis, and how conflicted I am, and that I own a firearm, and what kind of damage I could do. Well, then you could say, what's my judgment? Who am I to say? Well, I think my judgment is the best I could do in the moment. And I will consult others before I make action. I have a council of realists, people with level heads and rational thinking. So I got the hell out of there. And as my 20s prevailed, as I kept getting into relationships and jobs and finding who I was, I broke away from them. I individuated and became an adult. I haven't seen my mom since I was 24, 25. And my father, actually, I confronted him in my late 20s one last time to let him know what he did to me. And let it be, let bygones be, move on. It's been resolved. In my eyes. Here I am, slaving away in capitalism. Hard to get anywhere, living off-grid in New York. With all of you paying attention, witnessing what's happening in the world together. I wanted to be a journalist, understand how things work, why they work, and where we're going, how things actually are. Dear Diary. So I'm not even concerned with a relationship, intimate with a romantic partner at this point. The point is finding your own peace, coming to terms with your trauma and or lack thereof. Some people come from great families and are still in contact with their parents, but mine was not recommended. If I could go back and yell at them not to ever meet, I would. And I had that phase. But there's no point. You can't change the past. You gotta make do with the cards that you've been dealt. I know that's a cliche, but that's what I've done. So I don't know how long this video is. I hardly make this long of videos. But I just wanted to tell you that I've been down a winding and beaten path, carved my own way, and have dedicated my life, actually my life, like a big chunk of my time, to trying to understand climate science and where we're headed as a human race. Because I got thrust into this without my consultation about the design phase or any of it. The least I could do is try to understand where the hell I'm going, where I'm at, and where I'm going. Of course, how I got here is important. Some things are beyond explanation, and I'll never be able to explain. Why did I get the brain that I did? And the genes that I have to have intelligence and willingness, courage, to look at the data objectively and tell it to the internet. I can't explain, and there's no need to explain. It just is, which is what I do. I just get on the camera and I just tell things the way they are. I've been given a gift to speak and conceptualize, rationalize, condense data and present it to you. So that's what I do. It's a calling. That would be called a calling. A mixture of gifts and skills that you can use to do whatever you want to do. Build tiny homes, make yarn, join the Red Cross, teach Spanish, it doesn't matter. Do that thing. Because you get this one life. There's no afterlife. Okay? Let's stop the magical thinking. You got this one chance, no redos. Don't be a clueless moron. Okay. So that's me in a nutshell. Traumatized, disrupted youth, rebel in my teens, explorer in my 20s, and objective data truth teller in my 30s. Living through the Mad Max apocalypse in my 40s with all of you. Thanks for being along on the journey. More to come.